Most cordial welcome to you, your colleagues. Your presence, Your Excellency, makes this fourth R.K. Mishra Memorial Lecture a special occasion for all of us. And for all of us at ORF here, Honorable Minister Dr. Shashi Tharoor, you've always been special, a special place in our hearts. We're always grateful for the affection and the constant guidance you've given us and the support we've enjoyed because we regard you as a part of the ORF family. Our trustees, Mr. Lalit, Bhasin, Mr. Anu Tandon, Mr. Baljit Kapoor, Excellencies, our respected guests, ladies and gentlemen, as you all know, we assembled here today at the Observer Research Foundation to honor the memory of one of recent India's greatest, I would say, political ideators and visionaries, Mr. R.K. Mishra. And this lecture series, which was instituted, was not just to commemorate, but in a way to celebrate the life and vision of a great political and media personality who also happened to be the founder chairman of the Observer Research Foundation. And it is fitting, therefore, that we are assembled today on this campus, which was his creation. Now to recall, 1991 saw in India encumbered and struggling under a very closed and controlled economy, unable to move center stage to take its rightful place in the global community. Taking a big picture view at that point of time, in the middle of a financial crisis, was rather difficult. But RKM foresaw the challenge of reconciling different and sometimes very extreme political and ideological strains that threatened to tear us under the political and the policy landscape of the country at that point of time. And the crisis of 1991 could only have been resolved by discovering a minimum common ground that could support the superstructure of reforms that had become absolutely inevitable at that juncture. So thus was born the idea of a foundation where the best minds across the political spectrum could meet to debate, to argue, and finally arrive at the rudiments of a political consensus around an agenda for an India that could ultimately take on the 21st century. With those beginnings, the Observer Research Foundation has grown not as an advocacy organization, we are not an advocacy organization, but with a single mission of developing informed policy inputs that can facilitate the building of a strong and prosperous India that is at peace with itself and in sync with a rapidly globalizing world. Within his own lifetime, RKM saw his efforts prosper into the foundation, spreading its operations in Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai. And then he also laid the building blocks for the Calcutta Center, which I'm very glad to say today has this very year become a reality. Now 2 decades have passed since the Observer Research Foundation was set up under R.K. Mishra's inspired leadership. And as India has evolved and become a prominent actor on the global stage, its global presence too has been firmly established. Working with over 75 institutional partners from around the world, in 2012, ORF was ranked as a top Indian think tank in Asia by a worldwide survey of 6,600 institutions conducted by the University of Pennsylvania. RKM had set out to create a global institution, and he would be happy today with the determined steps that ORF has been taking in that direction. But then, Mishra ji, as we all knew him, was more than ORF. Born in 1932, he began his career in journalism from Kolkata, working with a number of prominent newspapers. He served as the editor-in-chief and managing editor of The Patriot and his sister magazine, Link, both very influential publications in that political milieu. But again, far more than editor, his importance as a natural mediator between conflicting voices inside and outside the political spectrum led him to becoming a member of the upper house of the Indian Parliament between 74 and 80, and a member of the National Integration Council of the Government of India, in which he was invited to assist in several key political projects under former Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao. During the BJP government, he was involved in several sensitive assignments and was a key actor in back-channel diplomacy between India and Pakistan. And as always, his interpersonal relationship skills, combined with his flair for grasping delicate nuances of political processes, made him an ideal interlocutor. He was passionate about the scriptures. Some of his last works were actually in Indian philosophy, the Vedas, the Upanishads, the books like Before the Beginning and After the End, The Cosmic Matrix, The Realm of Superphysics. These were some of the publications he did in his last years. But for us personally, all of us, he remains the epitome of a liberal thinker with intellectual tolerance and bandwidth that remains unique. His humility and ability to listen and empathize, his zest to learn from youth, kept his spirit invigorated, while his people skills endeared him to all of us. And he was particularly passionate about this region, the South Asia region, fired by a keen desire to see the region overcome the baggage of recent history to re-attain its socio-economic integration. Therefore, it is all the more fitting that you, Excellency, are here to deliver this lecture in his memory. Your Excellency, the Observer Research Foundation has long-standing linkages with some of the leading research institutions in Bangladesh. We recently hosted the India-Bangladesh Security Dialogue, the fourth in the series of which concluded last year. Bangladesh has always been close to our hearts. And, as I mentioned earlier, with the establishment of our new campus in Kolkata, we have come that much closer geographically also. We hope to leverage this proximity to enhance our efforts at bringing the two countries even closer. And in order to deepen this relationship, this particular center in Kolkata will focus its research on enhancing regional connectivity, strengthening existing soft linkages, and facilitating trade and investment flows through people-to-people exchanges. Because this relationship flows from a deep desire to ensure mutual prosperity and stability in the region. In this context, your visit here and the visit of Minister Salman Khurshid to a country earlier this year are of great significance. They indicate the tremendous will and ambition on both sides to forge closer ties and reimagine issues that could hold us back. We are sure that the spirit of cooperation will endure and outlast all of us. So let me thank you for joining us today, ma'am. And to begin the evening's proceedings, I would first like to ask our Honorable Trustee, Shri Lalit Bhasin, to present on behalf of the Warrior family a small welcome memento for you to remember us by.
Your Excellency Dipu, Moni, Foreign Minister of Bangladesh, Sunjoy Joshi, who has just spoken to all of us, Mr. Lalit Bhasin, Trustee, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, including the very large numbers overflowing in the adjoining room. I'd like to add my own word of welcome and as well to have the pleasure to introduce Her Excellency Dr. Dipu Moni, the Honorable Foreign Affairs Minister of Bangladesh, to this august audience. My first formal meeting with her took place on the sidelines of the Conference of the Community of Democracies as Minister of State for External Affairs at the time, and I still remember that very pleasant and constructive meeting. She came across to me as a person of great vision and character, committed to further intensifying the umbilical relationship that binds our countries. We have stayed in touch since then, and I've enjoyed calling on her and interacting with her on her subsequent trips to India. The Indian subcontinent has had a rich tradition of exceptional women in public life. Dr. Dipu Moni's life story is also an outstanding example of the remarkable contributions that women continue to make across South Asia. She is, of course, the first woman foreign minister of Bangladesh. She's also one of the two joint secretaries of the Bangladesh Awami League. Before her induction into the cabinet, she was the Secretary for Women's Affairs and a member of the Subcommittee on Foreign Affairs of the Bangladesh Awami League. She's a qualified physician. That doctor has more utility than my doctor, I can tell you, and draws upon advanced qualifications in public health and law. And on top of that, she is an advocate of the Bangladesh Supreme Court. Prior to her current assignment, her principal focus had been women's rights and entitlements, health legislation, health policy and management, financing, strategic planning, and social development programs, as well as, of course, foreign policy issues of the region and beyond. And I'd like to think we share a common bond in our shared commitment to working towards women's empowerment, which remains a major preoccupation in my current ministry. Both geography and history dictate that India and Bangladesh are tied in an eternal bond of close coexistence. From time immemorial, our peoples have shared each other's sorrows, enjoyed each other's festivities, and cherished commonalities of language and culture. Our ties were cemented through blood and the sacrifices of people of both countries during the struggle for independence of Bangladesh, which remain an indelible part of our historical memory. I'd like to take this opportunity to convey our deep appreciation and gratitude for the personal interest and initiatives taken by Foreign Minister Dipu Moni in strengthening our bilateral cooperation. The common cultural heritage that I mentioned that our two countries share creates a unique platform for building our ties, and I'm happy that in recent years we're truly beginning to do justice to our potential. And under her stewardship, certainly, the future seems promising for Indo-Bangladesh ties. In 2010, during Her Excellency Sheikh Hasina's visit to India, our two honorable Prime Ministers agreed to put in place a comprehensive framework of cooperation for the development of the two countries based on a mutually shared vision for the future. India's missions in Bangladesh issue about 500,000 visas every year, and thousands of Bangladeshi students study in India on a self-financing basis and are recipients of over 100 annual Government of India scholarships. With cultural and geographical similarities that complement each other, it presents immense opportunities to strengthen our bilateral ties further. We not only share water, but interestingly, India's longest border boundary is with Bangladesh, not, as many imagine, with Pakistan or China. Today we enjoy a multifaceted relationship encompassing every aspect of human life, commercial, intellectual, social, and cultural. Over the last decade or so, our relations have clearly been moving in a higher trajectory. Ever since the Awami League government came to power in January 2009, relations between our two countries have further intensified. These have also been buoyed by the landmark visits of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to India in January 2010 and the return visit of our Prime Minister in September 2011. These visits have opened a new chapter in our bilateral relations. The recent visit of our President, Sri Pranab Mukherjee, to Bangladesh in March 2013, which was also his first overseas visit after assumption of office, and it's always a pleasure for a president to visit a country where he can speak the local language. It testifies to our intent, I think, to continue cementing the special bonds between our countries. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh is also looking forward to the next visit to India of Her Excellency Sheikh Hasina, Prime Minister, later this year. This visit will further cement the bonds of trust, harmony and partnership that so happily exist between our countries. Our regular and intensive engagement with Bangladesh has led to considerable progress in our bilateral issues. What's remarkable about our relationship, and which may be an example for others, is that we do not have any insoluble problems between us. What may be described as issues are more of a work in progress, with clearly defined goals and objectives on which there is no divergence or dissonance. India attaches the highest importance to its relations with Bangladesh. Happily for all of us, our present level of engagement has acquired an unprecedentedly high trajectory, which reflects our mutual commitment to nurture a deeper and stronger partnership. We approach our relations with Bangladesh with utmost sensitivity and are fully supportive of the hopes and aspirations of the people and government of Bangladesh. The confidence and trust that exists between our two countries is vindicated by the recent conclusion of the extradition treaty and the renewal of the revised travel arrangements during the visit of our Home Minister to Bangladesh in January. Since then, several agreements of MOUs, including an MOU on an Indo-Bangladesh Foundation, an MOU on small development projects, one on an Agartala-Akhara rail link, and also the protocol to the Double Taxation Avoidance Convention have been signed. Both our governments have been working to amplify the growth of trade and investment in our countries. We've adopted conventional means like the removal of import duty on all commodities from Bangladesh, and this has resulted in increased exports from Bangladesh to India, particularly in the RMG sector. This is one area which holds the greatest potential for bringing substance to our relationship, and I would encourage more trade and investment ties between our countries. Some innovative initiatives like the border huts on the India-Bangladesh border have proved to be extremely popular with the local people of both the countries. Both governments have decided to open more border huts on the Tripura and Mizoram sectors of the border to further bolster these micro-trade ventures that will further integrate the economies of the northeastern states in Bangladesh. Investment and joint ventures between India and Bangladesh will encourage, we hope, our companies to invest there. And if they do, and they do so at the right level, we can bring capital, technology, jobs, and exportable surpluses to our friendly neighbor. Today, major Indian companies such as the Tatas, Larsen & Toubro, SEAT, NTPC, BHEL, Lanco, so many others are either looking to enter or they're already there and they want to expand their investments in Bangladesh. Currently, of course, we would welcome Bangladeshi investments in India. Certainly, Bangladesh can become a big hub for India's northeast and other regional markets, and your manufacturers could find a market there. My dear Foreign Minister, I'd like to thank you also and the government of Bangladesh for honoring the people of India for their contribution to the Liberation War of 1971 in the third and fourth phases of the award ceremonies that you held in October and December last year. This gesture has touched the hearts of all Indians. The joint India-Bangladesh celebrations of Rabindranath and now of the 150th birth anniversary of Swami Vivekananda are both yet another testimony of the common, undivided and shared literary and cultural legacy of our peoples. All our common efforts must be directed to preserving and nurturing this. We made considerable progress under the leadership of Your Excellency since the landmark visits of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to India and Prime Minister Manmohan Singh to Bangladesh. We must sustain and accelerate the current pace in all areas of cooperation, keeping in mind the direction set so positively by both our Prime Ministers. Thank you, Sunjoy and ORF, for giving me this opportunity to introduce my good friend Dr. Moni and a country of which I am personally very fond. I must say it's been a great privilege to know Dipu Moni over these last few years, and I wish her the very best in all that she does. And I know, like all of you, I'm now looking forward to listening to her.
I'm very happy to be here. No less so to be able to speak on a vision strategy for Bangladesh and a possible but imperative common vision involving Bangladesh's neighbors and beyond. I believe that the Observer Research Foundation is an ideal forum to share my thoughts on what I'm inclined to believe is common cause and common object. I pay my tribute to the founder, the distinguished late R.K. Mishra, and the legacy he has left behind through the foundation. As a practitioner in my ministerial capacity of the relations between the countries of the region and beyond, I am much enthused by a common journey which we have undertaken in the wake of decolonization. However, in this lecture I speak of many ideas which my government would profess, but the content does not necessarily reflect the final position of my government. In 1947 and the period after, we were admitted into a global structure predicated by the Second World War and events and processes which preceded the birth of our nation states. Principally, we became participants, inter alia, in the already existing Charter of the United Nations, the Bretton Woods system, and an evolving Cold War in 1947, when the principal components of South Asia were declared independent by an alien imperial power. However, there is much that has evolved over the following decades, and the world order has been reshaped, or there have been aspirations to do so. Even amongst the new dramatis personae in the world order, there has been reorganization and restructuring, so that the newly emergent states were faced with not just their immediate past rulers, but by an emerging world order itself, with which they would have had to adjust. In the case of my country, Bangladesh, we were born East Bengal within the framework of a newly independent state called Pakistan, with whose western wing we were separated by 1,000 miles of land territory and much greater distance by sea. We struggled for nearly a quarter of a century to identify and organize our nation and statehood within the parameters of a state born of a principle of a majority of religious adherents in particular geographical areas, rather than the preceding economic, cultural, social, ethnic, or even political structures. Our journey from East Bengal until 1956 and from East Pakistan after 1956 to Bangladesh in 1969, when we decided to call ourselves so, but yet to be born as a nation state in 1971, was the governing feature of our personality, intrinsic or imposed, until our emergence as an independent sovereign state in 1971. Unlike our immediate neighbors of the region and the countries beyond, our view of the region and the world beyond was marked by a second independence. There was no Bengali people's government for nearly 200 years. Hence, there was no Bengali foreign policy of the Bengali people, by the Bengali people, or for the Bengali people, practiced by a government of their choice. When the people of East Bengal became independent with the partition of Bengal, again there was, for the most of a quarter of a century, no foreign policy of the Bengali people, by the Bengali people, and for the Bengali people practiced by a government of their choice. Before 1972 and in the immediate run-up to the liberation of Bangladesh, there were foreign policy aspirations of the Bengali people, aspirations for the Bengali people, but not by a Bengali government for the Bengali people. However, although there was no Bengali government for nearly 200 years and no Bengali government for another quarter of a century following the partition of Bengal, there was during that era of nearly 200 years and a further 25 years a definite view of the people of what is now Bangladesh towards its immediate neighbors, not so immediate neighbors, and people in faraway countries and distant lands. Obviously, there was deep conviction that we are a historically identifiable people from an old past. We met the criteria required of a nation and indeed a civilization, but in 1971 we began as a new state. Our resources are vast: Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, and from lands abroad, including a vast canvas of language and literature, music, archaeology and architecture, philosophy, culture, and history. One intrinsic feature of a vision strategy would be to identify ourselves. This has been a major issue within the parameters of the nation-state that constitutes the People's Republic of Bangladesh. One approach towards understanding our identity would be the historical approach, by which we would mean the people inhabiting the territories now comprising Bangladesh through the ages. This would mean that part of the Ganges-Brahmaputra-Meghna basin through which the great rivers, the source of life, flow and exit through its delta. Significantly, life and socio-economic processes and the aspirations of the people living in this partial basin are governed by such means of livelihood and its consequential processes, which in turn deliver their resultant features. Under this approach, it is easy to discern that Bengalis are primarily an agrarian people living mainly off agriculture and such supportive occupations which sustain and promote agriculture. A second approach would be to discern the principal religious and philosophical inclinations of our people. By this approach, we would lend ourselves to the syncretic history of our people who have over time been Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, some even Christian while living on our lands. Whilst a historical syncretism is apparent in our lands, the modern state of Bangladesh has sought, through a third approach, namely its constitution, to declare itself to be contemporarily syncretic in the secular sense, safeguarding equality before the law and equal protection under the law to all its inhabitants. With the emergence of Bangladesh, we have further identified ourselves through our constitution by its various provisions. Thus, we are recognizable internally and externally by our name, territory, state language, national anthem, national flag, national emblem, our capital, the nomenclature for the individual, the state having been born of a historic struggle for national liberation, and the powers of the republic vested in the people. All of these features are set out in unalterable and unamendable articles of our Constitution and provide the core identity of the Bengali at home and abroad. But by whatever approach through which we view ourselves, there is much that we share with our immediate neighbors in the Ganges-Brahmaputra-Meghna basin. All the parts of India, one of our immediate neighbors in the Ganges-Brahmaputra basin, comprise part of a larger independent sovereign state. There are, of course, other sovereign states themselves in the basin, Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar, and from the upper reaches, China. Thus, where there was not an issue before the partition of Bengal or the Ganges-Brahmaputra-Meghna basin, in Bangladesh there are issues now arising from the advent of separate sovereign states featuring international rivers, new international boundaries, the trans-country migration of people, perhaps common deposits of mineral and hydrocarbons and an adjacent bay, involving the delimitation of maritime boundaries, apportionment of resources in the maritime zones, and in the access to the high seas and the deep seabed. I believe that these issues, which are international in nature, are new issues which are concomitant to new statehood and which, in our vision for the future, require the adoption of international instruments and processes to serve common cause and achieve common object. On the international plane, we have firmly set forth our identity in relation to the world in which we live, through our commitment to international peace and cooperation, commitment to the UN Charter under international law, the establishment of the Republic's right to its mineral and other things of value underlying land, the ocean within the territorial waters over the continental shelf, the establishment of the requirement not to enter into war without the approval of Parliament, and the affirmation of entering into international treaties which would not violate any of the fundamental principles of the Constitution or the fundamental principles of state policy, and of course, in contradiction with the rulings of the international courts and tribunals involving our interests. We are also safeguarded by rulings of our own Supreme Court, and that now define us as a nation-state where the doctrine of necessity, as distinct from the rule of law, has been jettisoned to govern our nation. Many of you will share with me that the doctrine of necessity expounded for the purpose of justifying unelectable rulers, in the main military rulers, had derailed the will of the people in determining their choices for the nation. You may now share with me that the doctrine of necessity invoked to justify military rule has both constitutionally and judicially been rendered a thing of the past. We are able to say now, as we have long desired, in the wake of the partition of Bengal in 1947 and the Gangetic Brahmaputra basin, and again soon after the birth of our nation in 1971, that Bangladesh is firmly, under its constitution and through judicial pronouncements, a democratic nation fastened to the rule of law. In this, we have gained parity with nation-states beyond our borders, which have had the benefit of continuity of democracy and the rule of law. During the course of our struggle for liberation, our people and leadership have expressed their aspirations through national cries and national chants. These have included Ebarer Shangram Shadhinatar Shangram, Ebarer Shangram Muktir Shangram, Shonar Bangla, Dukhi Manushir Mukhe Hashi Phutate Chai, Friendship Towards All, Malice Towards None, Digital Bangladesh, Daridra Mukta Bangladesh, Vision 2021, Secular Bangladesh, Democratic Bangladesh, We the People, Will of the People, and so on. The region shall be a zone of peace. Many chants reflect principles embodied in India's own constitution and polity, such as secular India, Garibi Hatao, and the saying, the measure of a country's democracy is about how it treats its minorities. India-Bangladesh relations will be an example to the world. We have in our respective ways sought to entrench such and similar principles in our fundamental principles of state policy, just as you in India have sought to do so in your directive principles of state policy. Having so embedded ourselves in our own view of our nation, how does our vision expatiate itself in the world which we wish to build with our immediate neighbors, not so immediate neighbors, and beyond? We, India and Bangladesh, have a framework for bilateral cooperation. We have a SAARC Charter and a SAARC Charter for Democracy. We have a BIMSTEC Charter. We are co-participants in a Commonwealth Charter in which we are pledged to uphold democracy and the rule of law. We are parties to a host of global multilateral charters, including the UN Charter, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. We have supported resolutions at the Global Forum, including the UN Charter of Economic Rights and Duties. We have trading frameworks, labor rights frameworks, justice frameworks, and processes. We are protagonists for women's empowerment and are at the forefront to meet the uncertainties of climate change. But do we have efficacious frameworks, instruments, and processes which would lift our people to meet their economic and social entitlements beyond the regime of rights and pledges? Some have posed the query, when will the time come for the great masses of our people living below $1 a day know a life beyond their immediate needs, consistent with economic and financial empowerment to achieve cultural, educational, literary, musical, and art aspirations? When will we be able to achieve a society of peace conducive to individual self-development? When will the unincluded enter a regime beyond their struggle for rights to be able to aspire for a world of the pursuit of culture, art, learning, and their spiritual inclinations? When will Sheikh Hasina's People's Empowerment and Development Model, adopted unanimously by the UN, be an intrinsic feature of real life? The regime we may seek is a new paradigm. Perhaps a paradigm from which states will derive the benefits of the rule of law, derive benefits from the containment of expulsion of terrorism, usher a new plateau for new undertakings which were not possible either before 1947 or 1971 or even before the present new era of confidence, nexus, and trust which we now share amongst ourselves, address competing issues and resolve such competing issues, address regional issues beyond Indo-Bangladesh bilateral concerns, address global issues, ensure benefits from global commons. The new dispensation would be of immense value for the establishment of a neighborhood of peace, stability, and immeasurable hope. To our advantage, our present dispensation is already marked by the restoration of the glorious bonds which existed at the time of the creation of Bangladesh. The framework for cooperation, which we have recently adopted, signifies the establishment of a new bilateral order between the governments and the peoples of India and Bangladesh. The new bilateral order recognizes the great vision of the people's leaders of the two countries, Bangladesh's first foreign friend, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, and Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, leaders who made great sacrifices and took enormous personal and political risks in the cause of establishing a sovereign Bangladesh and the best of Indo-Bangladesh relations. Today, after 42 years, we are able to discern natural progression in the bonding process of the peoples of the two countries. Our leaders, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and Bangabandhu Kanna Sheikh Hasina, are cognizant of a special relationship between India and Bangladesh. Our bilateral order is based on emerging principles of a 21st century new legal, peoples and human order that has shed off the encumbrances of an inappropriate formalistic relationship governed by an outdated colonial legal structure. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina have demonstrated that our relationship is underpinned by trust, hope, and conviction in a future of shared destinies for our peoples. We are able to look at the world through a shared prism. Our respective achievements lay down ever-changing bases for the sharing of the common resources of the two countries underpinned by principles of equity, fairness, and no harm to each other, a vision of the 21st century expressed through the will of the people. We recognize the great heritage of our respective peoples, born of riverine civilizations in the values, languages, literature, art, culture, education, science and technology, the legal systems, our modes of production, historically often undermined by factors and processes beyond the control of our own peoples, through the unrepresentative governments of the colonial era, and in the case of Bangladesh, also in the period which followed the assassination of the great people's leaders of Bangladesh. We stand on the threshold of setting in new mechanisms for realizing our common goals and aspirations. Our combined effort in the establishment of Bangladesh eternalizes our faith that bonding acts as a partnership for continuance, which anticipates unforeseen difficulties, unforeseen methods, and unforeseen actions in our relations. Our relationship provides a basis for invoking unavailed opportunities. It sets a high price for failure and makes the pursuit and adoption of common positions more feasible and viable. It enables specific targets to be achieved. Regular meetings between our governments, including meetings between our heads of government, facilitate an innate strategy for the realization of a grand vision. We envisage the advent of people's will in the basin, where such will would not be a will of the moment or the will of a government in office, but entrenched in an instrument based on a principle of a shared future. Not a future of division, apportionment, or one featuring cross-purposes. A shared future basin regime would recognize the divergent needs and priorities of each state on both the existing and emerging principles of international law. A shared future of the basin would characterize a journey addressing lost opportunities and the way forward, creating new opportunities for all their peoples, underpinned by a policy of inclusiveness and a high regard for those historically underprivileged or backward. A basin regime secured by a basin instrument would strive for a higher and better quality of life, materially, economically, and socially. A basin regime would address issues historically ignored by erstwhile imperial powers, but which are quintessentially important. A basin regime would advance the strengths of each of its component civilizations, 3,000 or 5,000 years old. A Bhasin regime would demand a commingling of its divergent peoples, each enriching another, joining hands, walking shoulder to shoulder in the undertakings in science and technology, and sharing the benefits of their collective and separate achievements. A Bhasin regime would demand a grand design to be converted into a grand concert. At the people's level, of future inhabitants and citizens, of women, of the specially challenged, of the yet unincluded, the marginalized, of the talented and the achievers, and at the material level of shared exploration, knowledge, culture, and the management of material resources. A Bhasin regime would advance consistently with international and regional regimes and charters, the United Nations framework, the regional frameworks like SAARC, BIMSTEC, and ASEAN. We would be aware of the encumbrances and of the impediments in our path. Often, the dramatis personae may act their part of cross or conflictive purposes, even of unfair competition, not by states and peoples, but by powerful cross-country or international actors whose goals are not consistent with national or people's objectives. But we would will a safe and secure future of the Bhasin regime and of the golden lands we share with our neighbors. Naturally, beyond the boundaries of India and Bangladesh, the Bhasin regime would include all other Bhasin sovereign states, namely Bhutan, Nepal, Myanmar, and in the upper reaches, China, as well as the Bay of Bengal itself. Above it would be airspaces, and beyond the delta, the subterranean regions below the sea, rich in minerals and other marine resources, etc. The benefits of such a Bhasin regime would be manifold. It would connect our nations to our ancient civilizations. It would obviate many doubts raised by national approaches where interests may be seen as conflictive. Instead, building on the complementarities between our nations, we would be able to realize the common aspirations of our peoples and grow together, achieve together, and build futures together. The Bhasin regime would integrate many economic and cultural processes, allow us to pool our respective fields of expertise and augment our human resources. It would enable a holistic approach rather than a case-by-case approach to cross-border or international issues by facilitating joint basin management of the common rivers, harnessing hydropower potential in the region, and realizing joint undertakings in the sea regime, including the seabed. The Bhasin approach, together with its delta component, would help us address the common realities of our region by ensuring the protection of the natural environment and enabling us to address climate change. At the same time, it would enable us to prepare emergency stocks of essential drugs and medicinal supplies to cope with epidemics, buffer stocks. Additionally, such a regime would allow for the creation of food banks, buffer stocks of commodities and natural resources, and strengthen information and technology databases. There would be more self-evident features. They would be inclusive and would accommodate a people's order beyond the negative compulsions of national interests alone. In envisaging the Bhasin regime, the object has been to pool together natural economies, cultures, ecology, riverine connectivity, contiguity of land, concourse among our peoples, a natural climatic integrity, and an inevitable future linking these features. What existed before the modern state came into being, and when passports or visas were not necessary, the human and people's order had primacy. A great segment of humanity was integrated through relations that interfaced harmoniously. The Bhasin regime vision does not preclude a bilateral order with a larger India, a regional order which excludes a country, South Island or Sri Lanka, partners under BIMSTEC, or interfaces with other regional arrangements such as ASEAN or ASEM, or multilateral organizations created for historical reasons like the Commonwealth, the OIC, the Non-Aligned Movement, etc. Nor does the vision of the Ganges-Brahmaputra-Meghna basin undermine the global order of which all of its member nations are a part. In envisaging a Ganges-Brahmaputra-Meghna basin regime, a new arrangement born of an ancient and historical order would be recognized, special and complementary to all other parallel regimes. As one writer has put it in succinct terms, this could be a heritage that grew and matured, and I quote, in the lands of the delta of three great Asian rivers that linked the whole of the Ganges basin, the Himalayan kingdoms, including the Tibetan Empire, Sikkim and Bhutan, China, Burma, and the coastal regions and islands of Southeast Asia, those of the Ganges itself, the Brahmaputra and Meghna. End of quote. I wish, hope for, and envisage the great matrix of special human processes in conceding to the ever-natural Ganges-Brahmaputra-Meghna basin regime.
Mr. Dipu Moni, Honorable Shri Shashi Tharoor, Mr. Sunjoy Joshi, Your Excellency, Mr. Tariq Karim, the High Commissioner of Bangladesh to India, Your Excellencies, Mr. Kapoor, Mrs. Anu Tandon, Mr. Raskotra, all the other trustees and scholars and researchers of the Observer Research Foundation, ladies and gentlemen. It is personally very gratifying for me, being a lawyer now of 51 years standing and a so-called leader of the Indian bar, to see in our midst two very distinguished lawyers of Bangladesh. And I heartily welcome, in addition, you see, to your being the Minister of Foreign Affairs for Bangladesh, I welcome you as a lawyer, and significantly, and if I may say so, more importantly, I also welcome Mr. Tawfiq Nawaz, one of the most distinguished lawyers of Bangladesh, a senior advocate of the Bangladesh Supreme Court and husband of our Honorable Minister Dipu Moni. Welcome, sir. Welcome. I have had the privilege, we had the privilege of meeting earlier, but I welcome you on this occasion. And I also bring to you greetings not only from the ORF and those who are present here, I bring to you greetings from the Indian legal fraternity, 1.2 million lawyers. We have just overtaken the United States. They have only 1 million. We have 1.2 million. And in my position as the President of the Bar Association of India and as the President of the Society of Indian Law Firms, I bring to you our good wishes and greetings. We have had a wonderful lecture from you, R.K. Mishra Memorial Lecture. That R.K. Mishra was an inspiration for all of us. And as the Honorable Minister has said, it was all-absorbing lecture of the highest caliber, and you have set in motion further progress of the Bangladesh-India relations. And we are sure that the vision that you have provided will play a great role in shaping future India-Bangladesh relations. We thank you, Honorable Minister, Mr. Shashi Tharoor, for your kindly agreeing to chair this session with your usual competence and caliber. And we thank all the media representatives for their interest and the distinguished guests who took time to participate in the event. I thank Mr. Sunjoy Joshi for the efforts made for organizing this lecture by a very eminent personality of our region. Thank you very much. Thank you.